The Gospel asks the question, who is thy neighbour? Well, there is no room for ambiguity, let alone opposition, amongst Christians and Catholics in particular, to the phenomenon of migration. The mass movement of people teaching is, of course, rooted in the biblical account of the Jewish people's movements, including those of the Holy Family, in the face of persecution. Indeed, the earliest Christians described themselves, to use another Greek word, as paroikos, which is the Greek word meaning resident alien. In the first 5 books of the Bible, the principle of loving thy neighbor is made and mentioned over 30 times. But far more importantly, the principle of the equality of man and the dignity of man underpin the essential Christian belief in the human family, as opposed to distinguishing between nationalities or tribes in terms of their qualities as persons. The universality of the Church, which has just been mentioned, is a key to this. In over 130 years of formalized Catholic social teaching, the Church's message has been constant and clear. That clarity has its roots, as I've said, in the Bible. People are to be unified, not divided, on the basis of their shared values, not on the basis of national identities, such as those which some have thought of in the past as a basis for dividing humanity, nor through the promotion of ethnic loyalties calculated to engender xenophobia or racism or hatred of one's neighbor. His Holiness Pope Francis, in his encyclical letter Lumen Fidei, has made the point that faith should help us to understand and in his there are no frontiers or barriers, political or social, behind which we can hide. Still less is there room for the globalization of indifference. So we must not, in these times, reject in particular those who are escaping from persecution, from war, or from climatic disasters. As we know, this rejection has been a feature of recent history in various parts of Europe. Some appear to wish to see it again in our times, although it must be said that this sentiment has not, thank God, been really evident in our own country. Apart from our obligations under international law to grant asylum to the persecuted, our responsibilities, therefore, as members of the human family and the Catholic Church, oblige us to offer sanctuary and welcome to those in need. But beyond refugees and our obligations to them, the desperate plight of many economic migrants seeking a better life, at grave risk, as we've seen, to their own, should drive us to seek to open up new avenues for legal migration. Instead of this, in some places, we hear a constant refrain in public and political calls for more border controls, and indeed for the erection of fences and walls. However, this should not be concerned, because he has spoken often of it. But at a more mundane political level, the European Commission's proposals for a positive contribution from countries by sharing out their responsibilities rather than leaving it solely to the Italians and the Greeks and those who are closest to the disaster to handle, has brought favourable responses in some quarters, including here. But also people have responded. For an example, in June, 230 churches in the Archdiocese of Cologne rang their bells 100 times. The resulting total of 23,000 peals were, in fact, death peals, to remind people of 23,000 people who had by then drowned since the year 2000 in the Mediterranean while trying to cross it. These migrants were fleeing dreadful events. Many more have died since. It is worth noting that Germany has been one of the best exemplars, with Sweden, in the relative number of refugees relative to population that it has taken. Also, in the last few months, more than by these various navies are then brought to Italy and left there. And that is less satisfactory. Why should the can be carried, so to speak, by countries merely defined by their proximity to North Africa, rather than by a sharing and a solidarity which would reflect the real Europe that we should be part of? Not every EU state has been prepared to offer those entitled to asylum the opportunity to avail of it. So we have to reflect on this. And surely we here in Ireland should remind ourselves of some of the worst moments of our own history. For example, the famine and the escape from Ireland, and from this county indeed, by those fortunate enough to make it to North America and elsewhere, and the fate also of those who did not. There are also more dramatic accounts that exemplify the failures of the past. One such is the story of a ship called the St. Louis. It left Hamburg in May 1939, packed with Jewish refugees. Having been turned away by Cuba, it was turned away by the United States. It was then turned away by Canada. It came back across the Atlantic, and some countries volunteered to take some of the 900 that were on the boat. The United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and France. They all subsequently perished in the Holocaust. Pope Francis has also spoken about the responsibility of Catholics to be politically active. And in the light of this current crisis, the subject of our response to the plight of migrants should surely be a priority in that activism, right across Europe and elsewhere. It absolutely would conform to the obligations imposed upon us by the faith in which we believe. Thank you very much.